Spoiler warning, this episode will contain major spoilers for the following anime and manga: Baki, Blue Lock, Haikyuu, and Kamisama no Yutori.
Ben,
Yeah. What do we have here today?
we have, very surprisingly, a guest.
Again.
Again. Back to the past. Now, we have... This is actually the... We are filming this episode after our future gambling episode, which is going to be released after this. But one thing that we have that is in common is that we have a guest.
Yes. Yes,
So-
we do.
Ben, would you like to introduce this guest, or shall I have her introduce herself?
I mean, I guess background story for how this guest came to be is that they are a mahjong addict who just so happens to be an anime addict, and therefore fitting with the theme for our next episode. And since we are recording this episode on the same day, 2 for 1.
However, the orders are inverse, but let's introduce our guest.
Indeed.
She is our mutual friend, Nikki.
Hi, I would just like to say I'm not a gambling addict. I'm not a mahjong addict.
Yes.
What a lie.
Yeah, it's just that whenever Ben messages me about mahjong, I will reply him almost immediately when I see it.
Yes, I don't know if a more apt definition of an addict exists out there, so whatever.
But I don't approach you first, so am I really the addict? Why
Oh,
do you
shit.
keep approaching me to play? Something
shit.
seems suspicious here.
Yes, I think, to be fair, I am an addict as well, so I'm not denying that.
Well, let us retrograde a bit to the past. Now, this is still an anime and an alcohol podcast, but perhaps we should address the latter portion. Something that is of note for our guest is that she is unable to drink alcohol because she is, in fact, allergic.
Yes,
Yes.
and that is why we have this bottle of oolong tea here.
Yes, so this fine bottle of oolong tea will be keeping her, or has been keeping her, company throughout our entire filming. It is actual oolong tea, not the kind that we postulate and propose in our very first episode, the pilot episode, where we were talking about Grand Blue.
Yes, we still advocate for safe drinking, and if it's gonna kill someone, let's just try to avoid that.
Right, so back to the former portion where we actually talk about anime. Nikki, how would you like to share with us about some of your favorite anime?
What is my favorite anime?
Genre?
John.
Wow, what sort?
Actually, I like psychological thrillers. I think that's my favorite genre, but I am terrified of supernatural/horror. So I know there are different genres, but sometimes, like in the same anime, there will be a mixture of these. So I only watch like psychological thrillers that have no spiritual monsters that scare me at night.
So I think that she would extremely love the anime Monster, which she
Oh.
has
Yes.
which would
Whereas
it appears that she has heard about,
I haven't watched it.
but she would absolutely hate Ben's fetish anime, which is Shiki.
Yes, tis most unfortunate since Shiki is such a good anime, but to each their own.
No, I got scared within the first 5 minutes. It's a bit too scary for me.
Unfortunately for the two of you, you will not be talking about either of those today.
Tis
Because-
most unfortunate.
Because this is the fitness anime podcast episode.
Oh.
However, as much as it is fitness, I'm afraid they're not able to fit enough of your favorite topics in, and we're going to have to go with something that's a bit more general. In fact, what we'll be talking about today is going to be slice of life in nature. Rather, we're going to be talking about sports.
Right, those are, I guess, two different genres of anime, but ignore me, please.
Yeah.
What? Share about this sports genre of anime, since I am clearly not one to have watched this genre.
Well, hypocritically, I study what is called sports science. However, I am more well versed in what is known as exercise science. So I'll be making examples related to that. But to start, Nikki, I heard that you have watched the latest Classroom of the Elite Season 2.
Yes.
Yeah, so I actually kind of used that as my pitch during the pilot episode when I was talking about this exercises as tools mentality that I have. However, we're going to be talking about a different set of tools today. So in the currently airing Class 100 Elite Season 2, in Episode 4, spoiler alert, the boys of Class 1D were performing a strength test of sorts. They were using what is known as a hand dynamometer. Now, I too own a digital hand dynamometer, although it measures slightly less than the one in the anime. In the anime, it measures up to 100 kilograms worth of grip force. However, the Camry hand dynamometer that I own only measures up to 90 kilograms. Now, Sudo, who is the fittest character in Class 1D, has a grip strength of 82.46 kilograms.
Wow.
Whereas the main character, the titular Ayano who is trying to avoid standing out in the class, squeezed a 60.6 kilograms reading. Now that kind of backfired because it was above the average grip strength of the guys in the class.
Oh.
But actually, do you guys have any benchmark of grip strength? Ben has used the dynamometer, but have you ever gotten to try it, Nikki?
No, I've never seen one either. Like in real life at least.
Well then.
Why don't you bring it out?
Right.
We get a live test run.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it was sitting right there, so convenience.
Now, as we have just tested, I'm capable of producing exactly 69 kilograms of force, or the
Nice.
amount of grip on the dynamometer. Of course, some variables like the adjustment of the handle and friction does matter for the grabbing process, but there are some other ways of performing the gripping that may influence the score. So Ben, you produced 39.5 kg of force and Nikki produced 24.9 kg of grip force. Now, there is a slightly more correct or standardized method that could be done. So I did this method in one of my lessons when I was in year 1 of university. That is, you hold the dynamometer parallel to the ground in front of you. You squeeze with one arm while lowering it to the side. So you see that when introducing greater complexity to the task, or when removing elements of stability, the amount of grip that is produced is much lower. From this method, I produced a much smaller value of 60.4 kg of grip. Now, I think most people will never access to the dynamometer, because I bought one off Lazada after I used it in the class, as it was quite reasonably priced and a potentially useful assessment tool. After all, grip strength correlates better to overall strength or force production and does not necessarily correlate to overall body composition, weight, so it gives me useful information on how potentially strong a person is in their upper body. But what do you think this actually translates into in real life, in actual performance of other exercises?
Good question. I mean, I would just assume that it helps you to grip the bar of your dumbbells and your barbells a bit more easily, and helps you hang on the pull-up pole a bit longer.
Well, that is correct in general. A strong grip would equate to better endurance on those exercises. So, gripping by itself is constituted of several techniques. In general, we can observe 3 techniques of gripping, of which they are manifest in the exercises that Ben has said. So the first one is called crushing grip. It is the kind of grip that is performed on the hand dynamometer. It requires holding an object and crushing it with the intention of driving the fingers towards the palm, like when you make a fist. So this is the most common grip, as it is a fairly dynamic gripping technique. So like when someone yeets something and tells you to catch it, then kind of like a jaw, your hands will swoop up into the air, catch the object by crushing it within the fingers. The next kind of grip that isn't really recognized and named is called the supporting grip. So this is the kind of grip you use for hand carrying bags and other objects. So you could think of it like the crushing grip, but one that you can sustainably maintain in a specific shape for a while. You know, like forming a hook with your hand and preventing it from bending out of shape.
Okay.
The last kind of grip is called pinch grip. In essence, it is a grip that is performed strictly with the fingers with the goal of pincering an object between them. So pinching is usually done with the thumb and any of the 4 other digits, although it can be done between 2 fingers. Now, exercises like the ones that Ben has said, so actually I would like to contextualize it to what we have right in front of us, which is the cup. You can technically apply all 3 kind of grips to the cup. So when you normally reach out to grab a cup, you hold it in a crushing grip.
Right.
So you're grabbing the cup securely to prevent it from falling off your hands.
Yeah.
So if you want to hold it in a slightly more cooler way, in the form of a supporting grip, what you would do is that you have your hands like one of those claw gachapon machines. You reach down over the cup, you just slightly pinch onto it in a way that you prevent it from sliding out of your fingers. So this is called supporting grip. Because the rim of the glass is slightly bigger than the base of the glass, and it creates this kind of like a conical shape. So when you pinch onto it, the combination of friction as well as your hands maintaining a shape prevents it from sliding out. Now the last grip that you can use is pinch grip. So this is what happens if your palm is not in contact with the glass, or if you are just grabbing the glass on the inner and outer surfaces. So you could just pinch the glass and pick it up like this. Unfortunately, as the audience is like audio only, they're not going to be able to see all the techniques that I'm demonstrating.
I think from your explanation, I think it's okay to, it's useful enough to visualize it. Probably.
Hopefully so.
Alright.
If anything, this is still an anime podcast, so I'll be giving a bunch of anime examples. And I think Baki, the manga series, has some of the best showcases of grip. So, most of you are, okay, actually, not most of you, it's just the 2 people in this room are probably not going to get the examples that I give. Ben, I'm not sure if you've watched the Baki anime or read the Baki mangas.
Unfortunately, I'm not one for the sports and whatnot kind of genres of anime, so you gotta give me more context.
I think Baki is less of a sport and more of just a super high testosterone fighting manga. Nikki, have you seen the Baki media?
Yeah, I've seen the anime adaptation on Netflix. Casually though, it's really just muscular men doing muscular men things and punching each other. That's the best I can describe it.
That's a very fantastic explanation of it.
Right, I think a no homo disclaimer needs to be inserted into there.
Right. So I'm just gonna give like a very slight explanation on Baki and its media. So Baki has many manga series, starting with Grappler Baki, and then there is New Grappler Baki, which is the Netflix adapted version. It's also kind of like the second arc of Baki. Then there is Baki Son of Ogre, which is coming out. There's a new Netflix animation that's going to be coming out soon. And after that, there is what is known as Baki Do, or The Way of Baki, and there are 2 seasons for this. Kind of like, I think there was one in 2016. They're focused on the revival of Miyamoto Musashi into the modern day. And then there is a 2018 version, which focuses on sumo, which will be quite relevant in the examples I'll give later.
Oh, slow down there. I think you've mentioned more arcs than there are in the One Piece series.
Well, the author, Keisuke Itagaki, has been writing for quite a fair amount of time. You can see the massive evolution in the art style of the Baki mangas as it has been put out.
Fair enough.
However, what I think is the more well-known Baki nowadays is New Grappler Baki, and the characters from there, as it is the one that had the Netflix adaptation previously. The full Grappler Baki, or the first arc, you could say, the first season of Baki in terms of manga, has anime adaptations, although I would say the quality is at best 2008, just like Kaiji.
Well, I guess you can't really expect much from the quality of animation during that period, but yeah.
So now I'm going to be talking about some of the gripping feats inside the Baki media. So for crushing grip, which is the first grip that I talked about, Nikki, do you remember the character Biscuit Oliver? Okay, Biscuit Oliver is that massive Cuban dude who comes from the Black Pentagon.
Oh.
Do you remember that guy? The guy who stood naked in front of another dude as he shot him with a shotgun?
Yeah.
Right, perfect. So
what?
in Baki, Son of Ogre, which has an anime adaptation so far, the Black Pentagon arc, Biscuit Oliver has several feats that were mentioned that are proof of crushing grip. The first is crushing a beer can when it's not open. In essence, he made it explode. So imagine grabbing that can of Coke when it's unopened and grabbing high enough that it spontaneously explodes. You will need a tremendous amount of grip for that. The other example that was given is that he picked up a stump from the axe that was buried in it. So a stump is kind of like the roots and the sawn off bottom half of a tree that is stuck in the ground. So what this example is that an axe is stuck in it, and so Biscuit Oliver grabbed the handle and picked it up. Now imagine holding a gigantic hammer. So this would kind of like constitute what it would be like to hold a gigantic hammer with a massive weight, a whole lever away from you. Now, in order to hold it, you're going to need to grab the handle end really, really hard and have a strong enough forearm muscle that will prevent your wrist from snapping downwards in a movement that is called ulnar deviation. Ulnar deviation is when the wrist tilts downwards towards the ulna, which is the lower forearm bone. Now, let's talk about a character that you might be more aware of. Surely you know who is Hanayama Kaoru. You know, the guy
I
who
don't remember
fought...
any of their names.
Okay, the guy who fought... the guy with a massive tattoo on his back with a lot of scars. He also stands possibly 6'9", I'm not sure, but very tall. And he is, I think, 18 years old.
18?
Yeah. Hard to believe. But he's actually the character who is most well known.
This one?
Yup. So he's the character that's actually the most well known in terms of grip
I have
feats.
no idea who they are.
So Hanayama Kaoru's best gripping feat so far is actually a combat technique where he grabs a person's arm and grabs it hard enough that it ruptures, i.e. it explodes in a fountain of blood.
Sorry, what?
In essence, he grabs your forearm very hard until it explodes in a fountain of blood.
Are you sure you're not describing the Berserk anime?
Yes, because the berserker armor does not exist here. There are only actual berserkers based on testosterone and adrenaline levels.
Yeah, I would assume so.
Yep. So this is actually one of the highest levels of crushing grip that has been demonstrated in the Baki media. However, in the later parts of Baki Son of Ogre, as well as The Way of Baki 2018, which is the sumo version, there are two examples of grip strength that have been most paramount in terms of crushing grip. The first is Yujiro. Surely you know who that is, Nikki. One of the main villains. Yujiro grabs a piece of coal, which is a piece of carbon. As you know, when put under enough pressure, carbon turns to diamond. It changes its form. Rather than turning the piece of coal into diamond, Yujiro grabs it so hard that he turns it into fragments of coal and coal dust.
What?
Yup. Now, back to Baki, The Way of Baki 2018, they introduced a new character by way of the name Nomi no Sukune. So the Sukune of Nomi, which is the place. Now, Nomi no Sukune is a sumo, or rather he is one of the creators of older sumo, or like ancestral sumo, however you want to call it. It's the original way of sumo fighting without the current rules that it has in actuality. So it allows for punches and kicks and bitings and throws. And it allows your back to touch the ground and you just beat each other until you both die. There's no dohyo, which is the ring that sumo is fought in, and there were no other rituals regarding that. Now, in the modern time of Baki, Nomi no Sukune II has been born. And how he established his position as a strong person in the manga was that he did Yujiro's feat, albeit successfully. He grabbed a piece of coal, and with a massive crushing grip, which Itagaki, the author, described. Well, we're not too sure about the math regarding it, but it said that he exerted over 10,000 tons of grip force onto the piece of coal, and he turned it into diamond.
He turned the rock into a diamond.
He turned coal into diamond.
Oh my god.
That is so far the most supreme feat of crushing grip that we have.
I mean, that's something that you can only pull off in fiction, because I assume if you were to attempt it in real life, your hand will burn off.
Yep.
It's not just force, but what will you call it? What was the term? Something leeway.
I have no idea what that is, but Baki has been well known to be ruining power scaling for a very long time, because Yujiro, in his titular feat of punching the ground and stopping an earthquake, has made it very uncertain of how hard he can actually hit something.
Right, only in anime.
Yep. Now, let's talk about the second form of grip that I'm talking about, which is supporting grip. Now, Nikki, do you remember Sikorsky, aka quite possibly the only Russian bad guy in the Baki manga? He is the guy with blonde hair, climb out of a missile silo, and uses like his knuckles to beat people up by cutting them to shreds.
Oh yes.
Right.
The
So
cutting them to shreds part.
So once the macabre details
what?
come out is when you remember it. So supporting grip is a grip that is something you see in rock climbing. Sikorsky, who is ostensibly the best rock climber in the series, climbed his way out of a nuclear missile silo, because they were using an abandoned nuclear missile silo as kind of like a prison to keep it inside. So supporting grip, in his case, was done with just his fingers, and not just his fingers at that, just the fingertips, where he gripped surfaces that were no larger than 1 centimeter, 1 centimeter long as far as his fingertips could grab onto, as well as patches of rust. And that is how absurd his feat is.
Huh.
Yep. Because what you have to do, remember, like I said, in supporting grip, is that you're kind of like turning your fingers into hooks, and then you're latching it onto things with enough force that prevents it from bending apart. So in essence, you could think about this: his fingers were really massive hooks that latched onto very small surfaces or patches of rust in order to climb his way out of the missile silo.
Right, these small surfaces, the small protrusions I can understand. Patches of rust is really pushing my suspension of belief, but it's anime.
It is anime.
Right.
Right. So Sikorsky is kind of like our exemplar in terms of supporting grip. But then we have our exemplar of pinch grip. Once again, I'm pulling the character Hanayama Kaoru. So aside from his bullshit crushing grip, which he uses to blow people's arms up, he also has a bunch of very cool pinch grip feats. So like you are going to use with a deck later, Ben, what he does with a deck is that he pinches the deck with in between his thumb and his finger, and then he just rips out the whole section of the deck, all 52 cards. Now if you try with just one card alone, ripping out a finger-shaped portion of the card is already fairly hard in itself.
Yes, it is a feat in and of itself.
The fact that he does it with 52 cards straight is unreal.
It is indeed.
However, it's not just about the feats in a very static setting like the one that Hanayama did that is what makes it cool. There's also another example that took place in the Grappler Baki Netflix anime adaptation in the fight between Biscuit Oliver and Che Guevara. So Nikki, do you remember who Che Guevara is?
Wait, please don't tell me it's the revolutionary.
It is the revolutionary Baki fight.
Sorry, what?
Okay, Che Guevara in the Baki context is a pirate who owns his own country. His country is called La Serna, and he has his own currency. And it is essentially a very small island nation on its own. Is very, very small. It might in fact be smaller than this country. However, it is very, not so modernized, very rural, and thus they have a lot of expansion to do in terms of land and construction.
I guess that's one way to portray Che Guevara.
Well, the thing is, Che Guevara is a very, very strong pirate.
Huh.
Physically strong at that. What he has done is that he has trained a bunch of men to be pirates with him in ancient ninjutsu.
The what now?
Ancient ninjutsu, such that they are all capable of pulling off feats like the handstand on the thumbs.
Yeah, that's what I thought you said.
Yup. So that would be another case of supporting grip. However, I want to talk about his feat of pinch grip that he did in coordination with Biscuit Oliver. When they were fighting, in order to determine who is the first and second strongest person inside the Black Pentagon, what they did was they played a game called Loser Losers. Loser Losers is a game that is essentially a fist fight with one's honor on the line. What you do is that you hold on to a handkerchief, or in this case a bandana, and then you will engage in a fist fight from there. Whoever lets go of the bandana, even if they're not knocked out, loses the game, because in essence they have let go of their honor in letting go of the bandana. So when the game started, what happens is that both of the players grabbed onto the bandana like normal people do. However, somewhere in order to flex on Oliver, Guevara actually changes his grip into a pinch grip between his thumb and his index finger. So he held onto the bandana with these two fingers. However, in order to counter flex and with kind of like to flex the element of humility to Guevara in a very weird kind of like weird kind of way I'll explain it shortly, Oliver uses his pinky and his thumb to grip onto the bandana, and he actually succeeds in forcing Guevara to change his grip back to a normal grip just to support his weight, while he held on with his pinky and his thumb. Now, the idea of using the pinky and the thumb comes from how nobles or people drank alcohol or drinks in the past with ice. Because once you held onto a glass, your fingers are going to get wet because of the condensation that is formed with the chilled glass. So in the past, people would grab spices using their thumb and their pinky, because spices in the past were something that were actually very valuable. So by sticking the thumb out while holding a glass, they would be able to avoid wetting their pinkies and thus their pinkies and their thumbs, and thus avoid taking too much spice, which is seen as a symbol of opulence and waste. As a result of that, it is seen as a symbol of humility in the context of their fight.
Ooh, that is an interesting take on the historical precedents.
However, the ability to hold on to the bandana with just the pinkies and the thumb itself is unreal. Now, why don't we also get to holding our glasses with our pinkies and our thumbs, because we can go on to our whiskey review.
Yes, let us go on to the whiskey review. Alright, so what do we have here today, Ed?
Well, today we have Jameson Irish Whiskey. I have already given away which country it came from.
Yes you have.
But Jameson is quite a popular party drink in that it is relatively lower cost, similar to Jack Daniels, Jim Beam, some other bourbons along those lines. Maybe Johnny Walker for blended whiskey. Yep. Shall we get started with tasting it?
Yes, why don't we? Oh, is this a bourbon or is it a... What exactly is this?
Well, it is not a bourbon because it's not American,
Right.
It's Irish.
But
And
it's
then
not Scotch.
It's not Scotch because it's Irish.
Yes, it's Irish.
So I think the only way we can describe this is that it's Irish whiskey.
Alright.
Yep.
Well,
Are you ready to sample?
yes, I am expecting something different, I guess.
Alright, cheers.
Cheers, man. Now, for one, it smells funky already.
That's kind of weak. I smell flowers.
Smells like nail polish.
Really?
Smells like nail polish.
So you're saying it smells like vodka.
Yes, it smells like the cheap vodka that you will get, and then you would taste it, and then you would say that it smells like nail polish.
Alright, let's give it a taste.
Yes. hopefully it doesn't taste like nail polish.
No, I think you're right. It tastes like nail polish.
Yeah, exactly. Well, okay, the aftertaste is not that bad. You can taste the barrel, and it's not exactly the most smoky. The spices
Light spice.
linger after a while. It is the initial taste that is just hard to put into words. Like,
I say it goes down smooth.
it goes on
Too
strong,
strong.
but
Nothing
the
really
initial
stands
taste
out
is
to
just weird. I don't know. I don't know how to put it into words.
It's the
just,
kind of kicker garbage that people take to get drunk.
Yes, that is an apt description of it, and there goes the Jameson sponsorship. So
Well, Ireland is pretty far, and I think it's north and south. So
oh my.
yeah, but this is a drink that you take to get wasted.
Yeah. In any case, hopefully, on having it on the rocks, we'll be able to bring out the taste profile a bit more.
Yep.
Yep. I guess that about sums up the Jameson's neat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Overall, can't really say too positive things about it. It's a basic whiskey.
Yeah. All right.
Right. After Jameson, and now that I've rambled quite a fair bit about grip based on one event that happened in Classroom of the Elite and quite possibly the entirety of Baki, one thing that both of these anime have in common is a fitness assessment episode. I may not have said it earlier, but Baki actually had a fitness assessment. As in not just Baki the series, but Baki the main character. Now, in case that people forget, Baki's first Netflix adaptation is an adaptation of New Grappler Baki, which is kind of like the second arc of Baki. And it was when Baki was still a student. So he had to do a fitness test for his school in one episode, which I actually do believe is adapted from Japanese fitness testing system in their schools. So the exercise that it consisted of is a 100-meter dash, the long jump, the baseball throw, pull-ups, and a 1.5 km run, which is about roughly a mile. Now, in schools, as part of national health and fitness tracking and for the sake of physical education, fitness assessments need to be done. And luckily, we have 3 victims of mandatory fitness testing here. You, and myself.
Are we really going there?
Yes, we are. So, I'd like to first ask, how do you guys generally perform for fitness tests over the years?
Fuck.
Thanks for the additional editing cue.
Terrible.
Uh,
Me and Ben are unfit people.
yes, the only sport that I claim to really participate in is esports, so, really says how fit I really am.
Unfortunately, the finger strength that you have there is not going to constitute to any kind of grip strength. So, well, were there any stations that you could at least consider your strong points?
I mean,
Could you, run fast for your 1.6 or 2.4 km runs, like how you run away from your problems?
I never run for my 1.6 or 2.4.
No, I think that's just a scam, but
No, I really don't run because I dislike it. But I love sit and reach and pull-ups. Those are the easiest for me.
nice.
Yeah.
unfortunately for our new and improved IPPT system, we only have push-ups and sit-ups. Luckily for me, I find that even after an extended period of stagnation, I'm still able to do them relatively fine. It's just running that seems to be a problem. Yeah.
Well, Ben, why don't we first try to talk based on Nikki's context, because I will actually get into further detail on the IPPT,
Yeah, why not?
the Individual Fitness Proficiency Test. Let's talk about the NUTFA test, which consists of 6 stations.
Yes.
Well, in primary school level, 1.6 km, and in secondary school, 2.4 km, and then you have pull-ups, or in the case of females, incline pull-ups,
Mhm.
or when you are in lower secondary, incline pull-ups. Then you also have your standing broad jump, based on a 3 meter kind of like a mat. Your sit and reach station, which is kind of like a trunk flexibility as well as hamstring flexibility kind of assessment. You also gonna have a shuttle run, a 4 times 10 meter shuttle run, where you either get wooden blocks or you get beanbags, and if you're very lucky, you just need to touch the ground.
Yeah.
And I think the last station that I forgot to mention, which is also part of the IPT, sit-ups.
Yep.
So those are the 6 stations that you have for the NAPFA test. Now, like Nikki said, I am also very good at the see and reach, although I am, well, at least now, pretty proficient at all 6 stations. So I can at least run 12 minutes comfortably for 2.4. Pull-ups, I can definitely pull above 10 on any day. Then standing broad jump, best I did was 2.5 meters.
Sorry.
Yeah, that is
And
I'm
I
shocked.
casually 2.5.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and then whenever I'm not really trying, it's like 2.2 something.
Just casually, you know,
Yeah.
2.2, easy stuff.
I
Yeah.
always fail my standing broad jump, you know.
Yeah.
Right. Then for sit-ups, I somehow hit the magical number of 48 every single time I do it. But see and reach is where I am typically manifest as a physical god,
Yeah.
because I can almost push the kind of like metal piece all the way to the very end of a 70-meter bar.
Same.
Yeah. So there was actually like I typically score in the 66 to 68 range. Now, were there any stations that you would say is your falling point, is your anathema, or like it's like major poison to your being?
Standing broad jump. I always fail, then need to retake.
Well, that is unfortunate.
But I find it very difficult because I think like for NAPFA, they decide like what the passing length or passing timing would be based on your age and another metric, which is either your height or your weight, right?
No.
I can't remember.
It's just your age, and then there are kind of like benchmarks across 5 different scoring standards.
Okay.
So I think it's like a B, C, D, E, and then you need a C minimum in order to get gold.
Right.
Standing
Yeah, it's
broad
really
jump.
just age that is the factor.
I
Yeah.
just remember that for mine, right, especially in upper set, for standing broad jump, you need to jump at least 1.6 to pass.
1.6.
But I'm
Yeah.
at the 1.5 range, and to me it's damn hard. Like all the short girls in my class, right, we always failed standing broad jump because we are all shorter than that length. And I don't think like your height in that sense has anything to do with how far you can jump, but it just mentally also seemed like an impossible feat that we couldn't understand how we are supposed to jump that
Well,
far.
fundamentally, it is a issue of power and technique, because you need to synchronize the power output from your feet and your entire kind of like a squat pushing off jumping pattern, as well as the forward momentum you get from swinging your arms. Yep. There's also a bit of a alignment of your torso in order to ensure that you get a forward launch instead of just an outward launch like you would on a vertical jump. Ben, what about you? What kind of
Well, it was always the pull-ups. Even if I were able to run, I would never be able to do a single pull-up.
Well, I guess if you were ever caught hanging off a bridge like they were in Predator, or hanging off a ledge, Alien vs Predator, you're going to
let me
fall to
drop.
your death.
Let me drop.
Yep. Well, when I was a lot heavier in secondary school, I think around the 120 kg range, pull-ups were of course impossible, but as I lost weight and as I practiced more often, I eventually got the 5 that was needed to get gold for Sec 3.
It was always strange to me when I just saw like this random guy just do straight up 40 pull-ups. Alright, yep. I guess I'm just inferior.
No, did you actually train for these fitness tests when you were younger?
Oh hell no.
Oh hell, now you know the reason
Oh,
why.
hell no. Look, we have different priorities in life. Mine was being useless. So,
Well,
So it's esports, not physical fitness
Exactly.
tests.
well, aside from feeding my Dota 2 addiction, one could say that I was also addicted to feeding my Messiah complex and my desires for power, and that is why I did a lot of training when I was younger. Now, how often have you guys actually gotten a gold score for NAPFA?
bold of you to assume that I have ever gotten a gold score.
Bold of you to assume I even have the desire for it in the first place.
Bold of you.
Well. I mean, it's not that hard.
You just said you spent a lot of your younger days training.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't say you didn't have to train. It's just that it's not that hard in the grand scheme of things. You just have to train for it until it becomes easier.
Well, hindsight 2020.
Well, I mean, the standards to get a goal were not particularly absurd in my opinion. Now, do you think that these fitness tests were a comprehensively good measure of your fitness overall, or do they paint a skewed picture, especially for a perceived gold standard?
Well, I mean, if it was designed to tell me that I was unfit, it definitely did the job.
Well, Ben, what do you think about it from the perspective of the IPPT?
So the difference between the 6 stations and the 3 stations?
Not so much the difference between the 6 stations and the 3 stations, but more so, do you think that these two different tests, the NAPFA as well as the IPPT, do you think they're good measures of your fitness, or are they just dog shit?
I mean, if their objective was to get a general idea of the general fitness, I think they would do fine. If they were looking at specific fitness, then perhaps a more specific test might be in order. You know, it's always a good idea to get an idea of how fast you can run.
I think this is where I proffer something that is a bit more meta, in that my take on these tests, and especially the IPPT, is that there's a very strong element of practicality when it comes to measurement.
Right, take it away.
In that you want to obtain as much good data that paints the population as best alike as possible, while making it as easy and less logistically demanding as possible. After all, you need to first standardize the measurements, such as finding the age groups and finding something based on the normal distribution, and then you need to measure an extremely large population. After, you need to measure primary school, secondary school, junior college, you need to measure all other tertiary institutions, and you need to measure an entire NS population base.
Fair enough.
And not only that, you also need to eliminate the skill component of measurement, as not everyone is similarly skilled or trained to be as skilled. And that is why I presume from NAPFA to IPT, they remove the standing broad jump. However, some things like your 2.4 km run is actually something that is, I would say, blurs the line between this. Because not only is it kind of like, it's a somewhat decent measure of your cardiovascular endurance, but you also need a very good amount of training in the techniques of running, and specifically for the distance of 2.4 kilometers. That is why in track and field, you have different running distance categories. You have 100 meters, 200 meters, 400 meters, 800 meters, 1.5, and 5K.
Fair enough. Pacing is a very important part in the 2.4 run.
Yeah, but back to kind of like the point about this is that I don't think that the data paints a very good representation of fitness.
How so?
Well, you see, the first part is that you need to get good data that paints the population in as best alike as possible in order to brag about it. And this is something that ministries want in order to show that they have a fit population to other people. Other people likely be other countries. So simple tests, not so robust, like the IPPT, will give you, what I could say, artificially inflated good scores, because you only have 3 exercises, of which you have a very biased metric, or not say biased metric, but a metric that is easy to give an illusion of a good amount of fitness. Do you really think 60 push-ups and 60 sit-ups is a good measurement of upper body and core strength?
Who knows? I would have no idea.
No, I mean, a guy who can do 60 push-ups may not be able to do a one-arm push-up, which requires a higher amount of strength and as well as stability.
Fair enough.
It's like I could do about 69 push-ups straight, but I can do at least 10 one-arm push-ups.
Wow.
Whereas I know people who are lighter than me who can do 60 push-ups for the sake of the IPPT, but cannot do a one-arm push-up to show off.
Fair enough.
Now, the second portion is the fact that they do not choose good exercises that demonstrate fitness well. like we just talked about, do you really think that push-ups and sit-ups and 2.4 km run are actually good ways to showcase fitness? In the grand scheme of things, no, because fitness embodies so many more qualities than you can show with just 3 exercises. In fact, what I think was a fatal mistake was the removal of pull-ups. Because you have a, pushing movement in the form of the push-ups, but what about the pulling movement and the entire other half of the upper body muscles? All your pulling muscles, biceps, rear shoulders, your entire back. Those are muscles that can be utilized in the pull-up, depending on the technique that you use for them. However, they also need to be measured in balance with your push-ups, and at a similar volume at that. So 60 push-ups, I don't think would correlate well to say about 12 pull-ups.
Oh, fair enough. They use an entirely different set of muscles. One does not really correlate to the other.
Well, there's also the issue of how much percentage load that is being used in each exercise. In that pull-ups, you use the entire full body weight, whereas for the push-ups, you're kind of using this trigonometrical representation of your center of mass.
Yes, your feet are touching the floor, so it's already reduced. But
Yup. But hey, enough of the dry talk about fitness tests.
yes.
Let's talk about something that is quite prevalent in schools as well: sports. I know Ben has, little to no knowledge of sports. So Ben, how about you? Name some that you can think about.
Dota, League of Legends, Blackshot.
Where's Hero of New Earth, Warcraft 3, Dota 1, Hearthstone, all
I'm
the
just
other old
kidding.
stuff from our younger years.
I mean, to be fair, in school they expose us to a decent number of sports, not say maybe the niche ones, but they give us an experience in each of them. So say volleyball, dodgeball, tennis, badminton, soccer, basketball, to name a few.
Yeah, those are some of the, easier sports to teach with less rigorous and strict rules.
Fair
and
enough.
the kind of things that students can do in kind of like their break times or after school hours with their own kind of like personal set of rules. Well, it's also a little element of physical education curricula that comes into this, in that PE teachers, physical education teachers, don't exactly want to teach exercise. They want to teach exercise in the context of a game, not in the pure exercise context. So not like the kind of resistance exercise bullshit that I would like to put out, but rather in the form of gamified activities that use these exercises, but in a more discreet and less obvious form.
Yeah.
So when you do things like football, you need to do things like leg extension, my favorite exercise for training my quads because I like to skip squats. Or you also get sprinting, which is something that is generally quite universal and is very useful in sporting activities like football, rugby, here and there. Things that require linear dashing.
Right.
Then things like badminton will have you do more, constrained movements like shuffling from side to side, jumping in various directions, swinging the arm. That's another one. Now, Nikki, how many sports are you aware of, since we both watch quite a fair bit of sports anime?
Not many, because I'm a lazy person. But I guess sports anime at least gives me that kind of exposure that I don't get in my daily life because I am sports adverse.
Well, that is quite unfortunate.
The forbidden fruit syndrome. You'll want that which you'll never be able to achieve even more.
I don't want it, but I enjoy watching other people do sports, even in real life.
So
just
you're-
that I don't want to engage.
So you're a backseat gamer.
That's right.
Fantastic. Now, regarding sports, I do think that, at least in anime, there is a strong springtime of youth element. Might Guy reference. Well, aside from the obvious fact that the targeting of sport anime is typically directed towards younger audience with a strong shonen setting and high school age characters. Now, something that I would like to bring up for sports is the issue of morals and sportsmanship. So I once heard a what I could describe as a proposed intention in a psychosocial class, that is to use sports as a vehicle for imparting moral values and qualities like sportsmanship, although there is a caveat that this was strongly dependent on whether players caught it, whether they catch these moral values while performing sport. So in a sense, these morals are not something you can learn, but rather recognize, accept, and choose to embody. Now I want to ask you, what do you think about the use of sports anime in a similar context? That there are some things like sportsmanship, moral values that you can learn from sports anime.
I mean, if you want to use anything to impart positive values, well, positive being arguable, all you need to do is really just have the portrayal of said value to be beneficial, and the portrayal of anything that goes against this positive value being detrimental to the overall experience of sports. But then again, it's a very sociology based interpretation of how values are imparted.
I think there is a major issue of the point that I brought about, which is whether people actually catch this notion. Whether
Make
they
it
recognize it.
Yeah, make it as explicit as possible, as in with all shonen anime,
But the thing where you repeat too many plots in the stories and it gets boring. People get averse to it.
Now, to be fair, plot is one thing, the execution is another.
Well, that's probably why we keep returning to Isekai despite how trashy and how diverse they are.
Fair point!
Yeah, especially with the release, or rather soon to be released, anime adaptation of I Have Been Reborn as a Hot Spring.
Wait, I thought it was the vending machine.
Right. And now you know where my interests lie.
Exactly,
Massive
right.
bodies of water.
Carry on.
Now, at least in my regards, I think that a well-developed sports anime with an author that actually knows what they are doing can provide some inspiration for developing fitness. Now, this is I've brought up this example many times, and it's Hajime no Ippo. It is a boxing anime and has a 1,000+ chapter manga that is currently still being serialized, written by George Morikawa. Now, George Morikawa is a guy who owns his own boxing gym, and he has active fighters currently fighting within Japanese promotions. The training that the fitness activities that he puts out within the manga have a large deal of inspiration in real life, and I believe vice versa, in that he either tests out what he wants to write inside the story with a real life athlete, or the converse. He actually creates something imaginary in the anime or manga, and then he gets his athletes to do it in order to validate whether they work in real life. So that's one case where I think an author who actually knows his shit can actually get and inspire people to do things. Now, one other thing that I want to bring about is that I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but there's kind of like a notion that one can keep fit by playing and performing sports. Now, it is my opinion that this is relatively untrue unless the sport has the same kind of physical demands that can be overloaded in similar way to conventional resistance training or other kinds of athletic training that results in positive fitness outcomes. So things like strength sports and sports with high demands on general conditioning. So strength sports being things like Olympic weightlifting, powerlifting, strongman, strongwoman, things that I would describe as sports with high demands on general conditioning would be things like rugby, things like American football, because they have kind of stolen football. Other things would probably be combat sports like mixed martial arts. What do you guys think about this notion?
I mean, for one, you would have to start off with a much more rigorous definition of fitness, or at least like something that we can base it off on.
I mean, I've definitely covered it in prior episodes.
Yeah, but maybe a full episode dedicated to just exploring what it means to be fit.
So you want a 5-hour episode?
Why not? No, I'm
Well,
just kidding. That can be an addendum.
Let me kind of abridge it here.
Yeah.
There are two kinds of fitness that we generally talk about: health-based fitness and skill-based fitness. Health-based fitness pertains to physical characteristics that are inherent to the body, whereas skill-based fitness are kind of like qualities that require some kind of conscious action to perform. So health-based fitness would pertain to things like cardiovascular health, that would be for the heart. Otherwise, things like muscular endurance, muscular strength, those pertain to the muscle. Then you have things that are skill-based, which are like power, because power is force times velocity. So you need to manipulate speed, and speed is something that requires a lot of conscious action to control. Other things would be things like coordination, balance, because you need to control multiple body parts, and the mental stress of controlling multiple body parts can actually cause you a certain amount of fatigue that disrupts your actions. So those are two kinds of fitness that we're talking about. But in this case, it's kind of strength sports are a bit more straightforward. They pertain to muscular strength, so kind of like the apex in terms of the amount of force they can produce. Whereas sports with a high demand on general conditioning would pertain to all of these both fitness categories and their various traits, as well as how high level these traits are. So that would be it. So when you perform sport, you typically have two things that come out from it. You have playing the sport itself and training to play the sport, or training to supplement your performance in the sport. So the part that I refer in this is the first part, which is just performing the sport, because that's the kind of thing that happens to recreational players. They just play the sport under the intention of keeping fit. So recreationally, they go and play like a 2 hours game of badminton. So the 2 hours game of badminton is not going to likely result in any positive fitness outcome. Whereas if you do the kind of training that would improve your performance in badminton, then they definitely will. However, if it's something like a game of soccer, just the game, the full 90 minutes of sprinting around can actually develop your muscular endurance, your cardiovascular endurance, as well as your power, just from the action of sprinting.
Well, assuming you're not the lazy one sitting at the goal.
Like Ben.
The or maybe intentional burn aside, that is true. Now, before we actually go into a sports anime example, let's have some Jameson on the rocks and see whether it becomes better.
Yes, hopefully it does.
Alright Ben, I'm sure that Rocky itself could constitute an entire sports anime series, but how about we get to Jameson on the rocks?
Yes, hopefully it will be a lot better than whatever Straight was.
It will take over the rocky start that we had. Cheers.
Cheers. Well, it didn't really remove the alcohol smell. I can still smell the freaking...
I want to say something weird. My first sip, I taste a steak.
So what?
It's 100% improvement.
Definitely. It is no longer the weird mishmash of tastes. But surprisingly, the spice lasts a lot longer.
Yeah, it's the alcohol and spice is staying a bit longer.
Yes.
It's staying in my nose, but it's not burning like actual fire.
Surprisingly, it tastes of... You can taste the barrel before you taste the spice. And then it's just spice all the way after that.
I'm actually getting a bit of like a fruity note that might have been like accounted for that weird steak taste when I first sipped it. It's a bit like grape.
Perhaps.
How is steak and grape similar?
They rhyme.
No, Ed is a special case.
Steak and grape.
He's a special case, as you can see, you know.
No, overall I think that the Jameson on the rocks is better than it was neat.
I guess it's an improvement, but you know.
Well, it doesn't make it a standout.
Yes.
Yeah. But it at least ameliorates the fact that, well,
it tasted like shit.
Yeah.
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 Alright.
Simplest way to say it.
That's not sugar coated. So yeah, it's an improvement, but an improvement over terrible is just not that much better.
Now, I don't exactly want to bring up bad memories, but I do remember almost spoiling an anime for you, Nikki. Do you remember what that was?
Can you give a clue?
It's a sports anime, as we are sticking to the theme.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And when was this? What do you say about it that spoiled me?
No, I think it was in one of our. I think I made a story about it on Instagram, and then you responded to it because you felt offended that you were spoiled.
Oh my god! Really?
Yup.
Clearly, you failed to provide a spoiler warning, so I think that's on you.
Is it really spoiling if I can't remember exactly though?
I mean, if you were offended about 2 years ago,
Yeah,
then
at the
yes.
At that point, it would be considered a spoiler.
Okay, so what anime is it?
It was Haikyuu.
Oh! What was the spoiler about? Do you remember?
Essentially, I was going to show you Haikyuu season 4. I was making a story about Haikyuu season 4, and you were not up to date at the point.
Oh my
And
god.
it was in the match between Inarizaki and Karasuno.
Oh, okay.
Yup.
Don't worry, you lost me at Haikyuu.
Yup, and in order to lose you even further, I would like to say that a Haikyuu final has been released.
Oh,
There
God.
is inconsistent information whether it's a movie or an anime final season. So if it was a final season, it would be season 5. And it would kind of tally because season 4 ended on the Karasuno versus Inarizaki match, and spoiler alert, it's going to probably end in the next game. And that is because of a very unfortunate event. I will not give further context for Nikki's mental health. If she heard it, it might degrade even further.
I think
Oh,
I
dear.
already know.
You already know what it is?
As in, I know what happens in that match.
Oh, don't worry. We can. Y'all can get to it when it's released. You know.
Well, that's assuming that she returns as a guest. I think that would be nice.
Who knows?
Nikki, what do you actually think about the Haikyuu anime? Is it good, bad? Would you give it a thumbs up, thumbs down?
I give it 10,000 thumbs.
Also, it's a solid 10 out of 10?
Maybe very close to a 10 out of 10. I don't know if there's any anime that I would confidently say is a 10 out of 10. Just because I'm picky like that, and I feel like it's very difficult to generalize a film or a movie or a series in that sense with just like a out of 10 rating. But I do think it's definitely one of the top animes I've ever watched. And actually, I didn't really enjoy sports animes until I watched Haikyuu.
Damn, so it was what started everything.
It was what got me hooked onto giving other sports animes a try. Yeah, for sure. And I think a large part of like why I like it is definitely because of the cast of characters. Everyone is really different, unique. It covers different points about why people engage in sports. It has a lot of backstory, so even the side characters all have like really great backstories and stuff, and I love it. And the matches are so exciting.
Oh, yep. It was actually a bit of a weird case for me because I didn't get hooked onto Haikyuu from the very outset. When I first watched Haikyuu, I saw the first season, and I kind of actually gave up in the first few episodes because I thought it was too, the interactions between Hinata and Kageyama was actually quite a turn off to me, and I didn't like their interactions at the very start of the series because at that point I had not known how much it would actually develop and lead to something called character progression, or rather it's how their characters develop over time. I didn't know that it would actually lead to well-developed character development. Then it was only when I saw in kind of like about a couple of years later when I saw season 3. If you remember what season 3 is, it was the battle between Karasuno and Ushiwaka's team. I'm not quite sure what the names are.
Shiratorizawa.
Yep, Shiratorizawa. So essentially it's like Black Crows versus a White Stork or something.
White Eagle.
White Eagle,
Yeah.
Yep. It was the one interaction between Hinata and Ushiwaka that got me hooked onto the anime once again, and I was convinced to watch seasons 1 and 2 just so I could watch season 3 without losing the context. And it was such an adventure just to find out how they interacted with all the other teams that they beat. Yep. I think there is Neko something? Nekoma. Then there's also the Dateko.
Yes.
Yeah. So those were all very good teams where they had good character development and very funny interactions.
Why you never mention my favourite team?
I feel like I know what you're gonna say. Is it the one with the number 1 spiker?
No, number 1 spiker is Ushiwaka. Okay, not number 1 lah. He's top 5.
You sure it's not Bokuto?
No, Bokuto is number 3 spiker.
Okay man, but he's number 1 spiker in my heart, man. He's the ace, man. He leads the way.
All of the team have ace.
But he's the only one that actually matters.
Oh my god. Okay, I can see who's your bias.
Yup.
No, it's not. Their team is called Fukuro Dani. But as in the one that Bokuto is from. But it's not my favourite. My favourite is Aoba Josai.
Aoba Josai?
The one that's led by Oikawa.
I knew it. Everyone loves Oikawa.
Was that not to love about him though?
He is quite a beast. In fact, he's probably the character with some of the best feats within the anime itself. That overshadows Ushiwaka. There was also one other character within Aoba Josai. Or was it the guy, the yellow-black buzz cut, is it?
Oh, Kyotani.
Yeah, Kyotani. Because Kyotani had quite possibly one of the best spiking animations in the entire show.
Yeah.
However, Oikawa's serve is completely on a whole new level. It was the most impactful serve in the anime that they even had, I think in season 4, Kageyama modeled it in a similar manner.
Yes,
It's the one where the spike was so fast, it just slammed straight into the ground. It just cut straight to the ball hitting the ground.
I love Oikawa's character. I feel like he's one of the characters that is outside of the main team where we actually get a chance to see him struggle with his progression in the sport. How it like reflects on his identity in a sense and how he views himself.
I think it's because Oikawa is not seen as he's not lauded as a genius like other characters. That's why. Is that he is the example of a very well balanced but basic character who has taken it to the utmost level. Unlike someone like Kageyama and Hinata who are both exemplars of specific skills. Like Hinata is a very explosive cutting jump, whereas Kageyama is being the absolute control tower that can send a ball during a set to wherever he wants it to be and stop at that point. However, Oikawa is such a perfect balanced character at such a high level of difficulty. He's essentially like the Demon King in a very well balanced video game. And speaking of Villain Kings, Villain King is usually a character, and that's actually what Oikawa ends up to be at the very end of the series. It's very funny.
He's big.
Would you recommend Haikyuu to any general audience?
I would though, because I feel like one of the best things about Haikyuu is that even though the plot revolves around like typical sports anime things like going for training, going for competition, like having
Nakama
teammates,
power.
power of like hard work and friendship. A lot of the things that you learn from Haikyuu has a lot to do with like character building. Maybe like giving people second chances, giving yourself a second chance as well. The idea of like creating friendships out of nothing but a simple shared interest. So it's a very slice of life and like well balanced anime. They do teach you things about the sport for sure, like the rules, the techniques, some skills. But more than that, I feel like it's a very well rounded anime that talks a lot about character.
That actually relates. Well, many of the things that you say actually relate to what I was going to talk about next, which is that Haikyuu is actually quite a realistic anime. In that it doesn't have a very super drawn out, power system. In that characters' abilities are very well grounded within a very logical, realistic human sphere of ability. Although it can get a bit supernatural at times with how eerily accurate Kageyama sets are, or how characters can be super intimidating based on how they're drawn with the art style. Now, one thing I want to talk about is abilities in sports animes. Now, I take it that you've seen quite a number.
A decent few, I would say.
Can you name some?
With like abilities.
You can just name and then I think we can isolate a couple from there.
How about Kuroko no Basket?
Yup, definitely one.
Others?
Others is an ice cream brand, but yeah.
No, I can't think of others. How about you name some? I'll tell you if I watched it.
Yes, Ed.
Okay. Yowamushi Pedal. That is a cycling anime that actually got
I
me
know.
into cycling.
Oh.
Yeah, and in fact, the bike I own is based on one of the characters. It's a DeRosa bike,
Oh, that's so
and inside the anime, it was called DeRose.
cool.
Yeah. Well, how about Days? Have you heard of Days?
I've heard of it, but I only watched the first 3 episodes of it.
Yeah, it's a bit cringy in that regard, but Days is I would say it's actually quite a well-grounded, realistic football anime. Yep.
I
Let's
feel like
see.
I watched all the weird ones.
Weird ones. Would you
Yeah.
consider Yuri on Ice a
What, sports anime?
sport anime? Ice skating?
I would though, because like for me, when I used to watch even more anime, I was active in like fandoms, and there are a lot of fandom events that are like catered to people who watch sports anime. So there is like an official list of all the animes that is considered a sports anime, and Yuri on Ice is on it because of certain things like there is a training factor. They compete on a national level with other people, and then there's one other criteria. But actually, under this list, right, the interesting part is that there are other animes that are so-called not really sports related, but because it is a competitive-ish anime, it is considered a sports anime in fandom events. Example is like Chihaya Furu.
Oh.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting.
Okay, let's blur the lines a little, because I know
Okay.
you watch this anime.
Yes. What is it?
Ballroom E Yokoso.
Yes. Oh my god, I love it. It is a sports anime.
It's a sports anime.
Yes,
You think
according
so?
to the fandom, it's a sports anime.
I would actually say that it's a sports anime. For ballroom dancing can be considered a professional sport
Yeah.
and not just a performing art. But one thing I will never get over is how long their necks are.
Wait, it makes them look so good though.
Really?
Because especially in ballroom dancing, a lot of the aesthetic is like elongating your limbs. So even in not ballroom dancing but ballet, that is a aspect where you're critiqued on if you join a competition. Yeah, like how you hold your body, the type of shapes you are able to elongate and form, and how good that looks overall, the type of power you seem to exude in that sense, the charisma, is something that they critique as well. Yeah.
Right.
So I love the fact that they have long necks in
Really? It makes me
Yeah.
think of
What,
like
swans?
geese. Yeah, swans.
But then if you are like if you look at it from a ballet context, if you look like a swan, you're doing it right.
Right.
That's the type of elegance that you wanna have.
Huh. Interesting.
Let's bring a bit more context and try to balance out the genders here. What do you think about Hanebado? It's a badminton anime.
I haven't watched it.
Damn. Okay. Then for all the people of culture, Keijo. Have you heard of Keijo? Oh, Ben, you seem to have heard of Keijo, man.
Yes, I have heard of it, and I don't think I will spend any time watching it because there's
No, but
plenty
the
of
issue-
information online.
But the issue here is it a sport anime?
Good question. I mean, it I would assume it is sports insofar as there is
Well-
physical.
No, we can argue that it is a combat sports anime just with a very specific set of rules.
Right.
One that is directed towards fan service.
Yes.
However, that fan service may be manifest whether there are censor bubbles or not, or white lines to cancel it out. We'll leave it up to the artistic discretion of the animating studio.
I mean, I came back from a break and I'm still lost. So yeah. To be fair, the only sports anime that I know of and has actually and I am tempted to watch is Ping Pong the animation.
Oh.
Oh, I've heard good things about it, and I might have seen a couple of clips, but I've not actually watched it.
Same. That is currently where I am with the sports anime. Yes, I am still stuck on considering whether I should start Ping Pong the animation.
Why don't we try something a bit more recent? Ahiru no Sora.
Oh, okay.
The what?
Are you
It's a basketball anime.
That's
Right,
right,
y'all lost me again.
It's a basketball anime on Netflix.
Hot damn.
What are your thoughts about it?
I actually haven't watched it, but I thought that it was
Oh.
a good spiritual successor to Kuroko no Basket.
I find it very hard to compare the two directly. You know, like, just because they revolve around the same sport doesn't mean the essence of the story is necessarily the same, in a sense. So I feel like with Kuroko, maybe because I wasn't a big fan of it, I can't really tell what the story is actually about, other than Kuroko finding his own way to play basketball that is detached from like his middle school team, and him like finding a way that he can play despite being so-called like a weaker player as compared to like the other people in the generation of miracles, right, who all have these like crazy insane like
They all have like super one trick power
Yeah,
while being
yeah.
extremely unbalanced characters. Just having extremely high stats all around.
Broken.
Actually, let me ask you something about a very obscure anime that you may have watched.
Okay,
Have you heard of All Out?
I didn't watch it.
You didn't watch it?
I didn't watch it.
It was actually surprisingly good. It's a rugby anime
Mm.
that you would like. I think the only cringy thing about it is the art style. It's very particular, but the author draws them in a way that looks exceedingly cartoonish for what is a manga art style, and it translates to the anime.
Mm.
Of note is that the author was also responsible for writing a story called We Shall Now Begin Ethics.
So what? We shall now begin ethics.
Ethics.
We shall now begin ethics. Just kidding, we are not going to begin ethics. We are talking about things more related to sportsmanship. But speaking of sportsmanship, let's talk about a sport that is one of the more corrupt ones. Do you guys know about boxing anime?
Well, there are a few that I know of.
Damn, I literally just said one about half an hour ago.
Yes, there's Hajime no Ippo, but I think that's the more maybe niche but popular one, Megalobox.
Mm.
That's right.
Mm.
Megalobox is actually a really nice boxing anime in the fact that the main character goes against the norm by using actual boxing against guys who are modifying their boxing skills with automation and like, exoskeletons.
Ooh, interesting.
Let's see. In case you don't realize, I'm actually just searching out for more anime. Oh my god, I think it's time to wrap up.
Oh
I'm
my
going to
god,
use the
yeah.
last one. This is a very
Oh.
sussy one.
From Now We Begin Ethics seems like an interesting anime that I haven't watched.
You can talk about it in the future episode. But now
Yes.
I have one last anime that I would like to talk about, and it's one that I got scammed by watching into by an alleged lolicon when I was younger, and that is Free Iwatobi Swim Club.
Sorry, what?
What?
Free.
Free. Are we free?
It is.
Are we truly free? No, we're not going into a philosophical debate. We're talking about
Yes.
Free Iwatobi Swim Club.
Free,
Yes,
the
it is.
yaoi inspiration for many Fujoshis out there.
The predecessor to Yuri on Ice.
Yes,
Yes.
that one. Oh dear.
Damn. That is correct. Free is an anime that is actually one of the earliest sport animes that I watched.
Hmm.
In that, as I said, I got tricked into watching it because I was told it was a good anime.
Same.
But then I found out that it was about swimming. I'm not sure whether it was about the fact that it was swimming or it was that I was watching dudes swimming that was the major turnoff, but I actually somehow stuck around and finished watching the entire series. Whether it was due to the manager or whether it was due to the fact that I thought swimming actually looked cool, I just stuck with it.
I didn't even get to the part where they had a manager. I only watched one episode.
Then you dropped it fast.
It didn't seem like my type of thing. Because at that point I still didn't really like sports animes. I haven't watched Haikyuu yet. So I just watched the first episode and I felt like maybe they took a bit too long to set up the plot. And also because the main character Haru, he's more quiet. And I don't really like that in main characters. So it kinda like lost my interest in that sense.
Yeah, I think the focus was to having a very like cool, cold protagonist.
Yeah.
With a very cool image compared to like the very fiery, hot shonen spirit kind of
Mhm.
character that you see in like Bakugo or you see in like Naruto or Luffy.
I like how you say Bakugo is the main character.
I mean,
Not complaining.
he's one of them. I wouldn't say he is not one of the main characters.
Yeah.
I mean, Bakugo may have ostensibly met a terrible fate recently, but hey, we're not here to talk about his supernatural abilities. We're here to talk about abilities in sports animes, particularly
Yes.
those that we just mentioned. So I'd like to ask you guys, of the entire list, how many do you actually think were fairly realistic?
I mean, you're asking me. I think the question is better posed to her because, you know.
I feel like at least for me, I would say out of all the sports animes I've watched, Haikyuu is the most realistic one.
Really?
Yeah, to me at least. The other realistic ones, like if you consider Welcome to the Ballroom a sports anime, I would say yes, because there is nothing supernatural about his ability. Like he's like a middle school kid, he's learning ballroom dancing for the first time, he has seniors that he looks up to, he practices every day. There is, in a sense, perhaps also because of the nature of the sport, there's not much supernatural ability he might be able to have, unless you tell me like he can dance for 10 hours straight and nothing. he's not fatigued or whatever.
Honestly, he actually did that in one of the first few episodes. He
Dance
practiced,
for 10 hours straight?
not say dance for 10 hours straight, but he did the same movement overnight. He was doing the box
Oh
overnight.
yeah.
And then he only realized that he had ripped his feet apart when he was, well, made aware of it when the staff came in, told him that, yo, why are you still in the studio? And then he was like, oh, I was practicing the box. And then he was like, ah. And then he realized that because, you know, you can't exactly do the same movement overnight without any prior practice or conditioning.
Yeah.
Suddenly, damn, he ripped his feet apart. Sounds pretty gritty and nasty.
To be fair, you know, my standard for what would be considered unbelievable is quite low because I think that Magnus Carlsen himself is already unbelievable. So, you know.
Well, I do think that Magnus Carlsen, who is one of the most renowned world champions in chess, is very much unbelievable, and typically by way of his performance in chess and the cognitive brain power required for that. But you know what else I think is more unbelievable?
Please, pray tell, what exactly do you think is unbelievable?
I think it's possibly a Jameson with a mixer. So how about we get to validating that statement?
Alright, I think it's time for something bittersweet after this bittersweet recap of the sports anime over the years. And hopefully it is more sweet than bitter because from the tasting it's pretty bitter so far.
Alright, Ben,
Yes.
it's time for us to try Jameson with a mixer. So why don't we mix things up?
Indeed. Hopefully it makes us the taste so much that, you know, I can't taste the Jameson anymore.
So now we can rid yourself of the bitterness in life by having you enjoy the bitterness of Jameson as you so quote. Cheers, mate.
Hopefully it's not bitter cause I'll thoroughly dislike it. Oh god, it is bitter.
Really? I think my taste buds are short, but it's actually not bitter to me.
Really?
I may just accidentally, almost coincidentally, spike your drink with a little bit more Jameson than intended.
Might explain why it's so goddamn
You
bitter.
may just actually have 3 shots.
Sorry.
When I accidentally tilted my arm. Okay, let's swap glasses.
Yes. Perhaps it is the extra Jameson indeed.
Damn, bro.
Yeah, it's so much more bitter in my glass. Holy shit.
As I remember, League of Legends had an achievement called Bad Medicine, and I think I just achieved it here in this one glass.
Oh my god, why do you make me suffer so, Ed?
accidents happen in the course of war.
Yes,
Although this
always.
is more of a verbal dispute, as well, you are not so good at talking about sports anime.
Fair enough, I will have to contribute some content somehow. So, what's your overall rating? I mean, for me, I know what it is already. It's at most like a 4. I give it a fucking 3.
Nah, I would say it's a 5.89.
Wow, how generous of you.
The numbers get looser and looser, and the decimal places increase over time.
Yes, I can see that it has shifted by 2 decimal places over time. Even rounding off to the closest 1 dp or the closest 0.5 dp.
Yeah, I
Has
think
escaped
if
you.
a whiskey fails to break the 6, it's not a particularly good whiskey.
Yes.
But it's the kind of thing that you would drink for the sake of drinking.
Unfortunately, even if I were to be desperate enough for a drink, I don't think I would actually get one of these. That's just my opinion, but it is not satisfactory.
Very well. For me, I think it is tolerable, but it might be the fact that I actually have a slightly better mixed cup than you do.
Perhaps.
But overall, taking into consideration the fact that it was not too good neat and it being on the rocks slightly salvaged it, but when I say salvage, it doesn't make it particularly better. It just makes it tolerable. Yeah, I think something sub 6, 5.89 is an acceptable score for me.
Yeah, I will avoid it as best I can. That's how I put it.
That's it. I think that concludes our whiskey review for the Jameson Irish Whiskey.
Yes, something different.
Yes. So after wrapping up Jameson after that mild cough there, I can say that it's time for us to begin wrapping up this anime podcast.
Yes.
With that said, I would first like to say something non-anime related. So just now I was talking about realism in sports anime, such as like Haikyuu, things like Keijo, things like Yuri on Ice, and Ballroom A Yokoso. Welcome to the ballroom.
Hey, don't forget Ping Pong the animation.
Except I think Ping Pong the animation is fairly realistic.
Is
Is
it
it not?
Good question. I have no idea because I haven't watched it.
That's it. I want to talk about something less realistic. Let's talk about superpowers in sports anime. Now, I think Kuroko no Basuke was an example that we gave earlier that starts to blur the lines between realism and idealism, as well as supernaturality. We know that it's not possible for characters to suddenly snap their fingers and boom, enter the zone, and then suddenly lightning splurts from their eyes and they start to create very hypnotic looking light trails as they swoop around. That's something that's not possible.
Yeah. That's pushing it a bit. Actually, yeah.
However, I'd like to first talk about I would say it's a movie of where sports and supernatural powers or superpowers starts to get blended. That is Shaolin Soccer.
Are you sure that's an anime? I'm
It
pretty
is
sure
not
it-
an anime.
Exactly. But
However, as we are, well, I would like to say that we are,
fucking boomers.
yeah, we are boomers. It is the quintessential superpowered sports kind of like media from our youth. Now, Shaolin Soccer is a kind of like it's a film by a guy called Stephen Chow. Stephen Chow is one of the most popular, I would say, Asian movie directors of all time. Especially with his hit film Kung Fu Hustle.
Yes. The one with what was it?
Ha Ma Kong, Toad Style, the Beast.
I can only remember the fat lady singing. Or is it
The
shouting?
lion.
Yes,
She's the lion.
and her slipper.
Yup. With that said, Kung Fu Hustle is getting a second movie directed by Stephen Chow once again to be released probably in 2020, end of 2022 or 2023. I'm just saying this for the sake of SEO and for the very mild link to the fact that sports anime have superpowers. But what I want to talk about is something that is, I would say, in between Haikyuu and Kuroko no Basket. And that is a manga series that is going to be receiving an anime adaptation by the end of 2023, which is called Blue Lock.
Alright, please explain a bit more because I have no idea what the hell that is.
Nikki, have you ever heard what Blue Lock is?
I have. It's really popular on Twitter or online spheres in general.
Well, I only use Twitter for some other content. However, Blue Lock is a manga that is about soccer. Now, you might be thinking, why the hell is it called Blue Lock? That is because Blue Lock is the name of the facility where about 300 football players in Japan have been, well, entered, is the nicest way of saying it, voluntarily, of course, into a rigorous training program where they will all try to be developed into the number one striker in Japan. That is because the coach and the designer of Blue Lock, Eigo Jinpachi, has designed this entire training facility and a massive master plan in order to develop what he calls Japan's best striker, in order to create what is known as the most critical moment in football history. In his eyes, that would be the birth of a revolutionary striker in Japan who would completely overturn Japan's standings in in the entire worldwide football sphere. Now, one thing I want to point out is that Blue Lock is written by the author Muneyuki Kaneshiro. He's the man who has created multiple, I wouldn't say call it revolutionary, but it's more of a crazy works.
Kami-sama no Iutori.
1 and 2, exactly. As well as some other weird stuff like Grash Ross. And for those who are in a more obscure sphere, Jagan, whatever the hell it's called. Now, his works have a very weird intensity to it, in that the characters tend to make very they tend to make decisions within the story that have moments of extreme intensity. This intensity is manifested, at the end of Kami-sama no Yutori 2 in the form of a fire in their eyes. That's the best way to say it. It's best exemplified when Takahata Shun, do you remember him? He is the main character of Kami-sama no Yutori 1. When he, massive spoiler, succeeds for the very first time in killing Kamimaru. It is when the author introduced this blazing fire in the eyes, which has then been imported into Blue Lock. Now, I'm only saying this simply because the art of Blue Lock has been extremely enrapturing, extremely captivating. It brings forth, or rather it has managed to bring across the legacy of intensity that is very inherent to Kaneshiro Muneyuki's works. However, take note that Blue Lock is, at its core, a football manga. Not American football, but football as in you kick the ball.
Right,
You just use your legs. Now, why I say that this manga exists on a spectrum between Haikyuu and Kuroko no Basket is that this manga has a very strong emphasis on superpowers, but not so out of line as you would see in Kuroko no Basket. It's very grounded in physical characteristics. Whereas in Haikyuu, you have what I would say is it's purely physical characteristics, but written and drawn out or illustrated in a way that is extremely realistic. Blue Lock blurs the realism but tries its best to adhere to it while bringing about a very mild fantasy element to it. This is when they bring about special abilities of individual characters, which I'm not sure you are aware of. For example, Isagi's Metavision.
You gotta go into more detail.
Right.
Yeah. What is metavision?
Okay. Now, this constitutes major spoilers.
Okay.
However, I'm going to talk about Blue Lock and abilities in detail because I think that is a very suitable topic to wrap up this entire podcast episode on. Now, we don't typically associate superpowers with our modern day athletes. We may call them superhumans because they stand at like the very apex of performing athletes. However, it's not like they're so out of the world that they are kind of alien to us.
Fair enough, they're still restricted by their human bodies, and being just at the apex of it doesn't mean they get random superpowers.
However, characters in Blue Lock kind of blur this line. Characters are not just superhuman, but they manifest their abilities in an almost somewhat fantastical way. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we have Isagi, or rather Isagi Yoichi. He is the main character of Blue Lock that everyone should be keeping their eyes out of. And that is because he is someone who is somewhat ordinary. We were talking about Oikawa just now in when we were talking about Haikyuu, that he is the manifestation of someone who is ordinary, however, has managed to bring himself to a very high level of performance. So, in essence, a very well balanced character who has managed to bring himself to the top by virtue of that well balancedness. However, he doesn't have that one characteristic that makes him superbly stand out. Now, Isagi is very similar in this regard. He is a very ordinary person. However, he has characteristics that allow him to stand out despite the fact that he has ordinary fitness and ordinary physical performances. He is not particularly strong, he's not particularly fast. He doesn't have a build that allows him to stand out from the rest and dominate the field. Rather, he is on the smaller side, especially as pointed out by the author, as a Japanese. Now, what he does have going for him is extremely well honed spatial awareness. Spatial awareness in the story is his ability to know where things are on the soccer field. Now, the soccer field is massive, and being able to know where everything is quite a good feat by itself. However, knowing where everything is doesn't make him particularly good at anything apart from trying to steal goals. What happens if he manages to harness the ability to know where everything is going and predict where everything is going? Does this ability sound familiar to you? To see everything on the court or the field and predict what they're going to do?
Kageyama?
No, man, you guys clearly haven't watched Kuroko no Basuke, the final movie.
I mean, clearly I haven't.
Wait, I think I did though.
Yeah, do you remember the Emperor Eye of Akashi? When Akashi first used the Emperor Eye, it was used in very one-to-one settings,
Yeah.
where he predicted the movements of whoever he was in a face-off with, and then that would allow him to do a cutting back motion that would cause them to trip and fall.
Yeah.
That will allow him to cause them to kneel to him as he is the emperor. Now, in the movie, when Akashi kind of like his alter ego sacrifices himself to give the abilities of the Emperor Eye to him, he gains an advanced Emperor Eye that is able to surpass the antagonist. I think it's called a Demon Eye or something like that. And he is now able to see and predict the movements of everyone on the field. That allows him to make the best passes that would supersede whatever anyone could possibly predict or try to stop. Now, Isagi manages to attain a similar ability to this regard by virtue of his spatial awareness. However, it's not so absurd that he would use it to pass because he is a striker. His only prerogative is to try to score goals. So he uses what is now developed as the meta vision. Now, do you guys know what the term meta means? Ben, you should know this.
Yes, I mean, it is, to put it simply, is somewhat of a take. Is an attempt to distance yourself from the intricacies of the topic and take a look at the overarching themes in the discussion.
Yes, you have the most part of the idea if you would try to like complicate the sentence. But what meta could simply be substituted for is about or above. If you have a 3-dimensional perspective on things, it would mean to have a 4th-dimensional perspective on things.
You'll
Now-
be talking about the topic itself and not what the specifics of the discussions are.
You'd be talking about things about the topic rather than just about the topic itself. For
Mm.
example, if I were to talk, let's say my meta perspective on exercise,
Right.
it will represent my understanding from beyond the grey box, in that I am cognizant of the grey box rather than just the inner 2 circles.
Right.
Right. I'm sure Nikki has absolutely no idea what this is because at this point in time, the Silverman's addendum has not been released.
Fair enough.
However, meta vision, what that means is a vision that is above or about. That means that Isagi uses his spatial awareness to make predictions of every player on the field. However, his predictions are not exactly perfect, but they are good enough that it will allow him to function similarly to Akashi with the Emperor Eye. Whether he has the technical skill of Akashi is another issue. Isagi is not the most talented player. That is why he is someone who kind of like is a character who falls beneath the sphere of a character in Kuroko no Basuke. Not so fantastical and a bit more grounded in reality. However, is above the absurd groundedness of reality that characters in Haikyuu have, where they are pure physical ability and they don't have the kind of drawn out kind of like a supernatural ability, I would say. Kind of like Kageyama probably stands as the only exception to this, where he has such a supernatural ability to detect people and send a ball that stops exactly at the point where he wants it to. All the other characters are a lot more grounded in their physical capabilities.
I mean, you wouldn't be pushing it to say that people can actually aim for a specific location and get it, so it's not really pushing my boundaries of expectation.
I mean, it's something that is very possible.
Right.
The things that the athletes do in Haikyuu are all very possible to us as humans. We can have a good idea of where to throw a ball when we want it to, like if you're trying to pass a ball to someone,
Mm-hmm.
you can kind of predict the trajectory of the ball and have it move in the path that you want it to end up at. However, what Kageyama does is that he sends it to that point and has it stop. Whereas in reality, balls have momentum.
Right.
They would actually travel past that point and is dependent on the person to catch it.
Fair enough.
Whereas Kageyama sends it to a point where it's so ideal that Hinata or any other of the teammates close their eyes, swing their arm at blank space, and the ball would just be there.
Well, I mean, to be fair, most League of Legends players are able to execute that level of prediction, but it's sports and esports is not sports.
But the thing is, you're manipulating 2D images.
Fair enough.
Trying to do that in an actual 3D environment, dealing with all the forces around you, is another issue.
Fair enough.
However, the things that happen in Kuroko Basuke are straight up bullshit. It's just not possible to do some things. If you have actually managed to stuck around to the end of the 75 episodes, you would see that in how Kagami does the second level of zone. You have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about now, but maybe Nikki has something to say. Nikki, do you remember what the second level of the zone is?
What is the second level?
Dread, it seems that I've gone too far. The second level of zone is when Kagami kinds of like manages to mentally fuse with Kuroko, and they are able to achieve a level of coordination that was not able to be achieved
The part
previously.
where there's a gate, then he opened the gate, is it?
Yup.
I think that is a metaphor for something else, but carry on.
I think it's kind of sus.
Is there
Yes,
a romance?
It's super
However,
sus.
you could think about it as a manifestation of their teamwork to the extent where supernatural feats are possible. Supernatural feats of coordination, supernatural feats of performance, such that they storm the entire Rakuzan team, aka the team that Akashi is on. So, hearing about all this chatter about Blue Lock, are you looking forward to the anime adaptation?
Yes, it is. But actually, I'm also quite interested to read the manga just because of the art style.
Oh, is it the fiery eyes of intensity?
I think the way that the mangaka draws tension is really, really amazing. Like, that's one of the reasons why As the Gods Will, Kami-sama no Iutori stuck with me for a really long time. I read that when I was in Sec 1, and it is consistently my favourite manga that I've ever read, even until now, after 10 years.
You like all the macabre stuff, don't you?
Well, that is a statement.
Okay, one, the premise is interesting, but I think, like, despite being stuck in that type of situation, right, the premise doesn't get old as compared to other, I would say, similar plot lines like Tomodachi Game. Tomodachi Game gets boring.
That's
very
tangent
quickly.
away from sport anime then.
I'm sorry, but because of
Hey, it's fine,
this...
it's fine.
Yes.
I want to ask,
Mhm.
what do you feel about the ending of Kami-sama no Yutori 2? Where Akashi is, well, dead. Amaya has his entire soul broken, and Ushimitsu is the only one left alive, and his final decision. It's a major spoiler for what he does, that he turns back time so that he could once again be Akashi. I know, it's very sus. But what do you think about it? Was it a good ending? Bad ending? Sus ending?
I feel like it is the type of ending that is fitting for a very strange manga like this. Do you get what I mean? It's like, if he did anything else, you would be like, what happened to this? Sorry.
It's very straight out of left field, but it fits the theme, right?
Yeah. I love it. What are your thoughts?
I think the ending could have been better.
In what way? Like, what would you have wanted?
I wanted a very good conclusion between Akashi and Amaya. Not it ended up in a very typical power of friendship kind of thing.
Yeah.
In that Akashi sacrifices himself in order to stop Amaya, the great evil, so that they could finally redo the world, and then Ushimitsu is the only person left alive to settle it. I think a world where the time reversal happened, and then it kind of like foreshadowed a repeat of all the games just so that Ushimitsu could end up with Akashi again, was not a particularly good ending. If anything, everything could have ended better, or rather, there could have actually been more plot explored with Acid Mana, who is the person who gave them their powers.
Yeah.
It ended on a really kind of like it's a very rushed note. It's kind of like when the manga got X'd, even though the serialization went for a very long time.
Yeah.
I guess you could say that for many of these anime series out there, the ending is just slightly more lackluster than you hope it would be.
Well, have you guys read Toriko?
No.
Unfortunate.
Well, we could go on about what sort of animes we have watched and have not watched, but I think this is a good time to end off this episode.
Yeah, I think we've actually covered quite a fair bit about sports anime.
Yes.
But
yes, we have.
not just sport anime, but we also covered quite a lot of fairly realistic things when we talked about fitness assessments, when we talked about grip strength, and most of all when we talked about Baki. Because as we all know, Baki is the highest standard for what is realistic in life. Now, my blatant sarcasm aside, I think we can end off the episode here. Overall, I think you have suffered enough of both hearing my voice as well as the Jameson Whiskey, Ben.
Well, to be fair, I believe this is how you would feel in most of my episodes because it is just me rambling. So
Until I
Correct.
bring in the super high technicality and scientific definitions that appear in a sports science or exercise science setting.
yes,
Nikki,
so
how do you feel about the first episode that you're a guest on?
I feel like I learned a lot of new things that I wouldn't have known otherwise in terms of technicalities.
I'm sure that you, not just new things, I'm sure you learned very sus things as well. Before that said, if you have enjoyed this episode, like, share and subscribe, and keep looking forward to the next new episode.
yes, and drink responsibly.